Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving into yet another wild chapter of the Nintendo 64 history, with 10 more games that stirred up some serious buzz back in the day, and honestly, still gets people talking. The games we're spotlighting today didn't just toe the line, it practically somersaulted over it, with a mix of edgy content, quirky mechanics, and a vibe that left players either totally hooked or completely baffled. We're going to unpack the whole story, what made it tick, why it ruffled so many feathers, and how it carved out its own weird little niche in the N64's legacy. Okay, enough stalling. Here are 10 more controversial Nintendo 64 games. Perfect Dark launched for the Nintendo 64 in the year 2000, and it pushed the boundaries of what was expected from a first-person shooter on a Nintendo console, both in terms of gameplay and controversy. Developed by Rare, the same studio behind GoldenEye 007, Perfect Dark took the espionage action to the next level with a darker, more mature narrative, featuring secret government conspiracies, alien involvement, and brutal gameplay. Unlike many of Nintendo's family-friendly titles, Perfect Dark embraced a grittier tone with realistic weaponry, blood effects, and suggestive themes. This stark contrast to Nintendo's traditionally more sanitized image led to debates over whether the game was too violent for the system's core audience. Adding to the controversy was its inclusion of voice acting and dialogue that contained mild profanity, something rarely seen in a Nintendo-published or exclusive titles at the time. Concerned parents and media outlets questioned whether the game's realistic depictions of assassination missions and covert government warfare were appropriate for a console often associated with young players. Beyond its content, Perfect Dark also found itself at the center of a large debate about the role of violence in video games, especially in the wake of rising concerns over first-person shooters influencing real-world aggression. The late 1990s and early 2000s were a period of heightened scrutiny for violent video games, with titles like Doom and Quake already facing backlash from lawmakers and advocacy groups. Perfect Dark, with its futuristic yet grounded setting, customizable multiplayer deathmatches, and even AI-driven enemy system that made gunfights more intense, only fueled this ongoing discussion. Some critics argued that its advanced graphics and realistic combat mechanics blurred the line between entertainment and simulated violence in a way that could potentially desensitize players. While the controversy never reached the same fever pitch as other M-rated shooters on the market, it highlighted an ongoing tension between Nintendo's evolving library and the industry's growing embrace of mature cinematic experiences. Despite the criticism, Perfect Dark became a cult classic, proving that there was indeed a market for mature storytelling and action-packed gameplay on a Nintendo console. Superman 64 launched for the Nintendo 64 in 1999, and it didn't just crash land, it plummeted into controversy, earning a spot as one of the most notorious flops in gaming history. Developed by Tidus Software, this ambitious title aimed to let players embody the Man of Steel, soaring through an open-world metropolis packed with missions that captured Superman's heroic essence. What players got instead was a glitch-ridden nightmare. Controls were so clunky they felt like kryptonite, repetitive ring-flying tasks that drove everyone mad, and a fog so thick it hid the game's already underwhelming visuals. Unlike titles that stirred debate with bold themes, Superman 64 became controversial for its jaw-dropping incompetence. a stark betrayal of the sky-high expectations tied to both the N64 and Superman's iconic status. Reports of a rushed development cycle and a restrictive licensing from Warner Brothers, like rules against Superman fighting civilians, only deepened the mess, sparking outrage over how such a broken game could bear the Superman name. Critics and fans alike slammed it as a cash grab, igniting debates about quality control and whether developers and publishers had a duty to deliver playable products, especially for a console known for classics like Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time. Far from saving the day, Superman 64 became a symbol of shattered promises, leaving players wondering how a superhero this mighty could fall so hard. Beyond its laundry list of flaws, Superman 64 landed smack in the middle of a bigger storm about licensed video games and the pressure to honor beloved franchises. The late 1990s were a wild era for adaptation, but Superman 64 stood out as a colossal failure that exposed the dark side of cashing in on a famous name. Fans felt cheated, and the game's producer, Eric Kane, didn't help, shrugging it off as quote-unquote for kid, a dismissive jab that lit up forums and deepened the rift between players who demanded better. Whispers of Warner Brothers meddling, like limiting gameplay to keep Superman squeaky clean, pointed to a clash between creative freedom and brand protection, a recurring headache for licensed titles. This wasn't about violence or mature content like some controversial shooters. It was a wake-up call about the industry's rush-to-market habits and the risk of slapping a big logo on a half-baked game. Superman 64 didn't spark congressional hearings, but it became a punching bag in gaming culture, a cautionary tale about prioritizing deadlines over quality. A reminder that even Superman can't fly when the game beneath him is grounded by shoddy design and broken dreams. Hexen launched for the Nintendo 64 in June of 1997, and it stumbled onto the scene with all the grace of a rusty battle axe, swinging wildly between ambition and controversy. Developed by Software Creations as a port of Raven Software's PC hit, Hexen Beyond Heretic, this first-person fantasy shooter promised players a dark medieval romp to hack through demonic hordes with axes, maces, and magic in a sprawling dungeon crawl. But instead of epic adventure, players got a clunky mess, tank-like controls that locked out smooth movement, pixelated graphics drowning in frame rate stutters, and a save system so greedy it chewed up 90 pages of the 123-page controller pack. It clashed hard with Nintendo's polished, family-friendly reputation, sparking debates about whether such a shoddy port belonged on a console known for quality. Adding fuel to the fire, its eerie atmosphere creeped out some younger players, hinting at a tone too grim for the N64's typical audience. Hexen still raised eyebrows among parents and critics who wondered if this buggy, brooding relic was a misstep for a system tied to colorful mascots and kid-safe fun. Beyond its technical train wreck, Hexen landed in the crosshairs of a bigger storm about console ports and the N64's place in the evolving shooter landscape of the late 1990s. This was the era when Doom and Quake had already put first-person shooters under a microscope, with lawmakers clutching pearls over violence in video games. Yet Hexen's controversy wasn't just about its blood-soaked axes or undead foes, but how it fumbled the ball compared to peers like GoldenEye and Turok. Its outdated Doom engine felt ancient next to those slick, innovative titles. Critics like IGN's 1997 review tore into its ugly, slow, and old vibe, arguing it dragged a respected PC franchise through the mud. Some players worried its sluggish combat and glitchy multiplayer, where detail levels tamed even further, highlighted a lazy cash grab, blurring the lines between legacy nostalgia and shameless exploitation. The backlash never hit the fever pitch of M-rated giants, but it exposed a tension between Nintendo's growing library of mature experiments and the expectation of top-tier execution. Despite the flack, Hexen carved out a quirky niche, a flawed cult oddity that showed even a dark fantasy flop could find a strange foothold on a console built for brighter heroes. Hybrid Heaven. Hybrid Heaven launched for the Nintendo 64 in 1999, and it stood out as a unique blend of action, RPG mechanics, and science fiction storytelling. Developed by Konami, the game featured a conspiracy-laden narrative involving government cover-ups, genetic experiments, and alien-human hybrids secretly infiltrating society. While this ambitious mixing of themes made Hybrid Heaven intriguing, it also sparked controversy due to its unsettling depictions of biological manipulation and grotesque hybrid creatures. The game's story suggested that world leaders were being replaced by genetically engineered imposters, a concept that some critics felt pushed the boundaries of appropriate content for a Nintendo console. Beyond its unsettling themes, Hybrid Heaven also drew criticism for its unusual mix of genres and combat mechanics, which some found too complex or unintuitive for the typical Nintendo 64 audience. Unlike traditional action games, Hybrid Heaven used a hybrid turn-based fighting system where players could target specific body parts to disable enemies, a level of realistic combat detail rarely seen on the platform. Some critics and players were put off by this system, feeling it made the game feel more like a simulation of violence rather than the fast-paced action they expected. At a time when gaming violence was already under heavy scrutiny, Hybrid Heaven's focus on brutal, methodical melee combat raised concerns about whether such a detailed fighting system desensitized players to real-world violence. While the controversy surrounding Hybrid Heaven was not as widespread as some of the more infamous M-rated games of the era, it still played a role in the ongoing discussion about mature content on Nintendo's platform. Despite mixed reactions, the game has since gained a cult following for its ambitious storytelling and unique gameplay, standing as an interesting relic of the Nintendo 64's experimental era. Mega Man 64. Mega Man 64 launched for the N64 in the year 2001, and it was met with a wave of controversy. Not for excessive violence or mature themes, but for how it represented the iconic Mega Man franchise. A port of Mega Man Legends, originally released for the PlayStation, Mega Man 64 was seen by many fans as a disappointing adaptation that failed to take full advantage of the N64's hardware. The game featured noticeable downgrades, including compressed audio, lower quality voice acting, and the lack of the original's animated cutscene. This led to heated debates within the gaming community over whether the N64 version was an inferior product compared to its PlayStation counterpart. Furthermore, some longtime fans of the Mega Man series were already skeptical of the transition from the franchise's traditional 2D platforming roots to a 3D action-adventure style, and the technical shortcomings of Mega Man 64 only fueled their frustration. Beyond its technical issues, Mega Man 64 also became the subject of controversy due to its pricing and lack of additional content. Despite being a port of a 3-year-old game, Capcom released Mega Man 64 at full retail price, which led to a backlash from players who felt they were paying premium rates for a downgraded experience. The game's limited availability further exacerbated the issue, as many retailers understocked it, leading to inflated resale prices and frustration among collectors. Some critics also pointed out that Capcom's decision to bring Mega Man Legends to the N64 rather than develop an original Mega Man title for the system was a missed opportunity to cater to Nintendo's fanbase with a fresh experience. This debate underscored a larger discussion about ports, pricing, and whether third-party developers were putting enough effort into optimizing games for different platforms. While Mega Man 64 still retained the core charm and adventure of Mega Man Legends, its release remained a contentious moment in the franchise's history. Before we move on with our list, I'd love to know what you think so far. Sound off in the comments below if you're enjoying this video. And while you're down there, be sure to hit the like button. It helps out more than you know. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming videos. Okay, back to the list. Aero Fighter's Assault launched for the Nintendo 64 in 1997, and it marked a drastic shift for the beloved Aero Fighters series. Moving away from its traditional 2D style arcade shoot-'em-up gameplay and into a fully 3D flight combat experience. However, this transition was anything but smooth, leading to significant controversy among fans and critics alike. Many longtime players of the franchise were disappointed by the sluggish controls, which made aerial dogfights feel unresponsive and clunky compared to the fast-paced action of previous entries. Adding to the frustration was the game's questionable hit detection, where many enemy planes and ground targets often seemed to absorb damage inconsistently. This stark departure from the precise, reflex-driven gameplay that defined the series led to heated debates in gaming circles about whether Aero Fighter's Assault was a worthy successor or a misguided attempt to modernize a franchise that never needed fixing. Beyond its gameplay issues, Aero Fighter's Assault also generated controversy due to its steep difficulty curve and design choices that alienated casual players. Unlike the arcade-style accessibility of its predecessors, this installment introduced mission-based objectives and a limited selection of aircraft, which some critics felt stripped away the series' core identity. The game's dark, dreary visuals and uninspired level design only added to the disappointment, leaving many to question why such an established franchise was handled with what seemed like little regard for its roots. Moreover, the multiplayer mode, often a highlight in flight combat games, felt underdeveloped and failed to deliver the competitive excitement expected from a console known for its party-friendly multiplayer experiences. These factors combined to create a divisive reception, with some defending the game as an ambitious, albeit flawed, evolution, while others dismissed it as one of the most disappointing reimaginings of a classic arcade shooter on the Nintendo 64. All-Star Baseball 99. When All-Star Baseball 99 launched for the Nintendo 64 in 1998, it was widely praised for its impressive graphics, realistic gameplay mechanics, and deep simulation elements. However, controversy arose due to its aggressive use of product placement and corporate sponsorship, which some players and critics felt detracted from the authenticity of the baseball experience. Unlike previous baseball games, All-Star Baseball 99 prominently featured advertisements for real-world brands integrated directly into the stadiums, billboards, and even the game's user interface. While some saw this as an attempt to add realism, others viewed it as an intrusive marketing strategy that signaled a growing trend of commercial influence in video games. The controversy was further amplified by concerns that the game was targeted at younger audiences, exposing them to excessive branding in a way that felt more like a corporate advertisement than a sports simulation. This debate mirrored larger industry discussions at the time about the role of in-game advertising and whether it was a harmless addition or a slippery slope toward excessive commercialization. Beyond its brand controversy, All-Star Baseball 99 also faced criticism for its punishing difficulty and AI balancing issues, which some felt created an unfair experience. While realism was a core goal for the developers at Acclaimed Sports, many players were frustrated by the game's unforgiving battling mechanics and hyper-accurate pitching AI, which made scoring runs feel nearly impossible for casual players. This led to accusations that the game prioritized hardcore simulation over fun, alienating those who expected a more accessible experience. Additionally, early versions of the game suffer from glitches and AI inconsistencies, with fielders occasionally making erratic movements and runners being called out in seemingly unfair scenarios. These issues, coupled with the controversy over corporate branding, led to a divided reception, with some praising the game as a cutting-edge sports simulation and others seeing it as an example of how realism in games could sometimes come at the cost of player enjoyment. Despite these criticisms, the game still found a dedicated audience among die-hard baseball fans and laid the groundwork for future baseball titles on the Nintendo 64. Aidyn Chronicles, the first Mage. When Aidyn Chronicles launched for the Nintendo 64 in 2001, it aimed to fill the console's RPG void with an ambitious open-world experience. Developed by H2O Entertainment, the game promised a rich fantasy narrative and complex character development. However, upon release, it faced significant criticism for its technical shortcomings and gameplay mechanics. Players and reviewers alike noted the game's sluggish frame rate, which hindered the overall experience. Character animations were often criticized for being choppy and unrefined, detracting from the immersion in the game's expansive world. Additionally, the combat system was perceived as slow and cumbersome, leading to frustration among players. These issues were compounded by graphical limitations, including static and unexpressive character models, as well as a muted color palette that rendered the game's environments less engaging. Such technical flaws stood in stark contrast to the high expectations set by the game's pre-release marketing, leading to widespread disappointment. Beyond its technical deficiencies, Aidyn Chronicles sparked discussions about the challenges of developing complex RPGs on the Nintendo 64 hardware. The console's limited third-party support and hardware constraints made it difficult to deliver the expansive world and intricate systems that RPG enthusiasts had come to expect from titles on competing platforms like the PlayStation. The game's failure to meet these expectations not only highlighted the limitations of the Nintendo 64, but also underscored the risk developers face when attempting to push the console beyond its capabilities. Despite its ambitious design, Aidyn Chronicles struggled to find a balance between innovation and playability, ultimately becoming a case study in the complexities of game development during that era. Armorines, Project Swarm. When Armorines Project Swarm launched for the Nintendo 64 in 1999, it was anticipated to be a standout first-person shooter, utilizing the same engine as the acclaimed Turok 2 Seeds of Evil. Developed by Acclaimed Studios London, the game aimed to deliver an intense, futuristic combat experience against hordes of alien insects. However, upon release, it faced significant criticism for its subpar performance and design choices. Players reported issues such as poor frame rates, lackluster artificial intelligence, and uninspired level design that often left them disoriented due to the absence of maps or guidance systems. These technical shortcomings led to a frustrating gameplay experience, causing disappointment among fans who had high expectations for the title. Beyond its technical flaws, Project Swarm sparked controversy due to its perceived lack of innovation and failure to capitalize on its promising premise. Critics and players alike noted that despite the potential for a compelling narrative and engaging mechanics, the game fell short in delivering a memorable experience. The repetitive missions, combined with a weak storyline and anticlimactic ending, where the final boss defeats itself, left many feeling unsatisfied. This mediocrity was particularly glaring given the competitive landscape of first-person shooters at the time, leading to debates about the game's rushed development and whether it was merely a cash grab leveraging the success of its predecessors. Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker. When Return of the Joker launched on the Nintendo 64 in 2000, it was met with significant controversy due to its perceived low quality and failure to meet fan expectations. Developed by Kimco and published by Ubisoft, the game was based on the animated film of the same name, which in turn was derived from the Batman Beyond television series. Fans eagerly anticipated an immersive experience that would capture the dark, futuristic essence of the source material. However, upon release, the game was heavily scrutinized for its outdated and repetitive beat-em-up gameplay, subpar graphics, and poor sound design. The controls were often described as clunky, and the enemy AI was considered lackluster, leading to a monotonous gaming experience. This stark contrast between the game's quality and the rich narrative of its source material led to widespread disappointment among fans and critics alike. The controversy was further amplified by the game's reception in the gaming community and media outlets. Game Informer notably labeled the Nintendo 64 and PlayStation versions as the worst titles of the year, reflecting the widespread negative sentiment. These harsh critiques underscored the game's failure to deliver a compelling Batman experience, especially when compared to other titles available at the time. The game's inability to meet the high standards set by its predecessors and the beloved animated series not only tarnished its reputation, but also sparked discussions about the challenges of adapting popular media into video games. As we've explored these controversial Nintendo 64 games, it's clear that the system, often remembered for its family-friendly image, was not without its share of debates, disappointments, and unexpected backlash. While some controversies stem from violent content, mature themes, or licensing issues, others were driven by technical failures, misleading marketing, or missed expectations from passionate fanbases. Even when a game wasn't necessarily violent or offensive, issues like censorship, poor localization, and radical departures from beloved franchises created waves of controversy that left lasting impressions on the gaming industry. In the grander scheme of gaming history, these controversies serve as an important reminder of the challenges developers face when pushing creative boundaries, adapting existing franchises, or experimenting with new ideas. While some of these games are now infamous, others have gained a cult following despite their rocky launches, proving that even the most divisive titles can find an audience over time. The Nintendo 64, for all its nostalgic charm and revolutionary innovations, also played a host to a fascinating array of games that sparked debates, frustrated fans, and in some cases, changed the way the industry approached game design and marketing. Whether these controversies helped or hindered the legacy of the N64 is up to debate. But one thing is certain, these games have earned their place in gaming history for better or worse. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching this second part in our controversial N64 games. What are your thoughts on these games? Have you played any of these games? Are there any games I need to add to the third part? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked this video, please leave a like. If you didn't, that other button seems to work pretty well too. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing for a plethora of gaming related content, including but not limited to controversial games. I have something planned for later on that I really like to try and see if you all like, and I'm excited to do it, but I want to wait till I get maybe a little more subscribers, maybe around 10,000. If I can hit that number, I'm going to try something special for you all. But anyway, thank you all so much for the support, and please stay tuned for the next video. It's going to be about 10 more controversial Sega Genesis games. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.